And welcome to another edition of Quoth the Raven. I'm your host, Louis Bright Raven, 28-year professional comic writer, illustrator, talent scout, and editor. I've worked with Marvel, Arrow Comics, Caliber Press, Sleek Graphics, Ronin Studios. In the role-playing game industry, I've been with TSR, Wizards of the Coast, Steve Jackson Games, and I've worked with other clients as well, such as Upper Deck, gaming cards, and or trading cards rather, and Hasbro and other companies. Sorry about my camera's being a little weird, and so is my mic tonight. Trying to get everything set up. Reach me at Quoth the Raven LBR 72 at gmail.com. Tonight's topic of discussion is, well, the topic that's been kind of a buzz for the last week in the comic book industry. As most of you who will follow the industry know, last Friday, we kind of got shocked. Dan Didio, who was the co-publisher at DC Comics, was apparently unceremoniously fired from his position. Whether or not that was really, that's how it was perceived as far as how it was shown to the outside world. I wouldn't say it necessarily was completely something that he was hit from behind with. I think there were things going on behind the scenes that I'm not saying he knew it was coming, but there were signs. And so we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But we'll talk about that a little bit, and we'll talk about some reviews, and we're going to talk about what it means for the industry and what it doesn't mean for the industry. Because there's a lot of people speculating and talking this week, a lot of so-called experts, spreading gloom and doom that really doesn't need to be spread. So we're going to do our best to put out some fires and try and be realistic about what's really going on. Okay? But first, let's try and get to the questions. But before we do that, I have to do my usual statement, and that is in accordance with the COPPA regulations, this episode of Quoth the Raven is intended for ages 16 and up. While some of the content we will feature is quote-unquote kid-friendly, the context of this episode is to address and educate older teens and adults to inform them of said content for them to research as consumers in service of their youth. In other words, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, teachers, librarians, and etc. There is always the possibility of adult language present on the episode as well, rated TV 16 and up. And because it is rated TV 16 and up, let's go ahead and put that up there so that people know. That being said, let's get to our questions this week. Our questions will mostly revolve around the Dio situation. But we'll go ahead and start there. Several parties have asked me this question. The question is, now that Dan Didio has been fired from DC Comics, does this mean that you'll be able to pitch to the company now or work for the company now? It was never a situation of me not being able to pitch to DC. And certainly Dan Didio was not the reason I wasn't pitching to DC. If you pay attention to what I've said in the past, the issue was more Bob Harris, former editor-in-chief at Marvel, who is now editor-in-chief at DC, who I don't get along with. And that's why I don't pitch to DC. He's still there. So my status with DC, as far as my personal feeling and how I want to work with them or not want to work with them, stays the same at this point. I'm not saying it won't change at some time, but I did not have a real issue with Dan. I didn't know him personally. I know sometimes I called him Dan the dipshit and a few other things, but that was kind of me just being a smart aleck. and more than anything else. It was meant in fun and jest. Just same as I say, Bob Harrop his ass, or Joe Cheesy Queasiata or whatever. It's just it's pun names. It's not necessarily anything else than that. But no, it hasn't changed anything as far as my status with DC. Our next question is from Brandon in California. If AT&T were to somehow be watching your podcast or following you on social media, and they contacted you and offered you the chance to step in, would you take it? Why or why not? That's a good question. Brandon is a professional writer. He actually works in the comic industry. He has worked for Marvel. He has worked for DC. He works for other companies currently. I'm not going to, I don't know why he didn't let me use his last name, but he did. But anyway, I suppose if there was a certain situation, I might consider coming in as a talent scout or a talent development guy. I certainly wouldn't want to step in and run the whole show. I'm not one to be a cross-platform guy for the gaming or for video games and television and film and all that. I'm not into that scene. There's other people who are better qualified than I in that respect. But as far as getting a more diverse range of talent, and instead of having too many artists that are drawing similar stylists, or too many writers writing too many books, or writers that are already employed at other competitors, fixing that problem. If Time Warner or AT&T wanted somebody to do that and asked me to do that, and I didn't have to deal with Harris, blocking me or something, I had that power to do that, then yeah, maybe. But that's about as far as I would go in that respect. Our next question is from Ted in Columbia, South Carolina. And he asks, are you interested in the 5G or Generation 5 plan that DC is doing? I see a lot of people who are complaining about it, particularly retailers. What's your take on it? I haven't really had a chance to look at it. I've read a little bit of stuff online, but I'm really not confident in enough. I have enough knowledge to really speak on it yet. My impression so far is that I don't have a problem with them going forward in time and having new versions, I guess you could say, of Superman or Batman or whoever, whether it's Lucius Fox or Jonathan Kent or whoever it's going to be. That doesn't bother me. I'm of the mindset that the current generation of heroes, Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne and Diana, all should be closed off at some point anyway. I'm a firm believer in doing superheroes properly in the hero's mythology, hero's journey structure. And that means at some point the characters do have to have a point of closure. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into our conversation about Dan Didio. But so I don't really have a problem with that, but I don't know exactly where they're going with this zero generation, first generation, second, third, fourth. I don't know if they're making different imprints or if they're doing, are they going to try and flood the market with a bunch of books and who's working on the books? And there's a lot of stuff that really hasn't been answered yet. So it's pretty much a wait and see situation right now for that. Mm-hmm. Our next question It's from Anonymous. And he asks, do you think that the failures of movies like Batman, Superman, Dawn of Justice, Justice League, Shazam, and Birds of Prey are contributing factors as to why Dan Didio was fired? Well, they're not non-contributing factors, but no, they're not. They're contributing factors, but they're not key factors. If I was going to say that had an effect on anybody's career, I would say it has more effect on Jeff Johns than Dan Didio, because Jeff's the one that's over there in Hollywood in the film and television development with Berlanti and the others. So I think if those failures are hitting somebody's status, it would be more likely to be Jeff Johns than Dan Didio in that respect, in my opinion. Which could be why Jeff left DC as chief creative officer and went away from the publishing division in the first place. But we'll see. But no, there are other factors that were more prevalent to why he was released, I think. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Next question. It's from Eric W. from South Carolina. And he asks, where do you think Dan Didio might move to career-wise? Well, I think right now he's just going to step back and, kind of like take a break and evaluate where he is. I mean, he was at DC for 20 years. And before that, he was in film and television successfully as a producer and showrunner. So, I mean, he could go any number of places technically in terms of entertainment platforms. I think right now, though, I think he's going to probably just take some time with his family and recharge. And so there's that, So Nick Kegnetti says, hey, Lewis, how is it going? From what I've heard of the 5G thing, it's a lot to take in on paper, but DC's always been big on legacy characters, so I think it's something I understand them trying. Well, they here's the thing, Nick. We'll leave that up there for a minute. DC was not big on legacy characters until the 70s with the Bronze Age. Originally, and when Julie Schwartz created the Silver Age, his intent was to kind of get rid of the Golden Age stuff and close that off, like I was talking about with this, the hero's journey. He was taking the characters' names and then reinventing them and giving you a new thing. And then, but because of fandom, because of fans becoming the creators, they brought back a lot of those Golden Age guys, and then you had Earth 1 and Earth 2 and Earth whatever, and you had this huge stuff going on because of that nature. It happened more late in the 60s, early 70s into the Bronze Age. And I think if they'd stuck with it and just gone generation to generation the way Julie intended it, we wouldn't have that kind of legacy character stuff going on per se. We'd still have Batman, we'd still have Superman, and so on, but it would be, the characters would be passed down, maybe Dick Grayson would be Batman, or someone else would be Batman now, or Donna Troy would be Wonder Woman, or, so on. Or, by now it should be somebody else than those characters. It should be new characters entirely. Maybe Terry McGinnis would be Batman, like Batman Beyond, only Batman. We don't know. But, because we have kind of wanted to have our cake and eat it too and have everything at once. That's been part of why DC and Marvel both have been kind of having this issue with having too many books, too many different characters featuring too many books, and we can't afford it all, is because we stick to that notion that we got to have it all. And you don't really need it all, in my opinion. So I think that's a big part of it. But if they're going to do imprints, which is what I think they're going to do, I think they're going to do a separate imprint for the originals and then do the future for the 5G. I guess you can choose what you want. I don't know. We'll wait and see. Let's see. We got next question. Oh, wait a minute. I said where I think Dan was going to go career-wise, didn't I? We were still talking about that for a minute there. Got sidetracked. I think with Dan, he's got different options on the table. I think he can either return to television and film as a showrunner and do other things like that if he wants. I think he's got the possibility of even opening up his own publishing company. And I don't necessarily mean comics. I mean just a platform of publishing in general, not just comics, but prose fiction and digital platform publishing, which is a much larger market right now than comics is. So it just depends on what he wants to do. And I think he's going to take the time to let things settle down and figure out what he wants. I mean, he's not, like I say, he's been doing this for 30 years. He's not old by any means, but he's not a spring chicken either. So he's made a lot of money. He's got time to think about it. Mm-hmm. Okay, our next question. Multiplex means a bunch of people ask me this question. Do you think Marvel will end up with the publishing rights to DC's characters? Basically, what they're asking me is Time Warner going to sell the DC characters outright, and is Marvel going to buy them? And the short answer is no, it's not going to happen. The quick answer is I'm going to have to share a screen with you guys. So I'm going to do that. And that is Atomic Junk Shop is a site I normally go to. And it's atomicjunkshop.com. And this is the article. It's Putting Out a Fire. Is Warner Selling DC to Marvel? It's by Jim McCory. Jim's worked for Disney as an artist, and he's also worked for other companies throughout the years as an illustrator. And he runs this site, Atomic Jump Shop, and he also runs a few other websites. And he just posted this today about it. So I thought he answers it pretty well. So we're going to read it. As AT&T's attempt to acquire Warner grinds along, there are a great many rumors in the air, some going back as far as 2016, about the Warner monolith possibly being broken up and sold off in pieces, or some other massive restructuring for a variety of reasons. Those rumors got another boost this week from two sources. First, the garbage tabloid clickbait site Cosmic Book News. Jim's against Comic Gate, and he's against Ethan Van Sciver. So, we'll not worry about that. But as it were. But anyway, because of them and because of the things that Ethan has spread on his YouTube page, there's been that possibility being bandied about. Then, of course, Dan's departure apparently involuntary departure from his position, fueled endless speculation and fanboy conspiracy theories. Variations on the question have been popping up on Quora and Reddit for a few days now. So it seems it's up to me to clear up a few misconceptions. So as to this notion that Warner is selling DC to Marvel, given that even the clickbait article I mentioned earlier didn't actually claim that, I think it's safe to say it's not going to happen. But let's first nail down what that might mean. It seems a lot of people have the impression that this would mean DC will shut down the comics division and sell the characters to Marvel, and that now the Justice League will pal around with the Avengers in one big happy unified universe. Others suggest that Warner also wants to sell off the movies and merchandising and just split off all of DC Entertainment and sell it like a used car on Craigslist. Well, first off, it's not going to be Warner that sells it. It's going to be AT&T, because AT&T is the parent company, and AT&T is the one that has the control over Warner Media in that respect. But that's neither really here nor there. But what are we talking about? First, some numbers. The bulk of profit that DC generates does not come from comics. In fact, the comics are a pretty minor consideration. After movies and television shows, the big money in superheroes comes from licensing. Batman brings in $494 million a year, and Superman follows behind at $277 million a year. If you add in the merchandise sales for Wonder Woman, Flash, and Harley Quinn, you're talking about at least $1 billion, with a B, in revenue every year, not counting your movies, your TV shows, your cartoons, and comics. If you add in the revenue from movies and other media, Batman alone has generated over $28 billion for DC Warner. For context, that's twice what Looney Tunes has produced, and Looney Tunes is the core of the Warner brand. So I doubt that Warner or AT&T is dumb enough to casually throw away all that revenue when comics is the only part that isn't working. That right there should spell it all out for you. But we're going to go on a little bit further with what Jim has to say. The second reason why Warner still publishes DC Comics, even though there have been noises about them ceasing publication since the 1970s, see a book called Comic Book Nation, The Transformation of Youth Culture in America. There's a section that talks about them discussing it prior to hiring Jeanette Kahn as publisher. Character names and concepts cannot be copyrighted. Only the actual comics published are protected by copyright. The costume designs, names, and logos are protected by trademark law. But where copyright has a fixed term, usually 95 years for comics, trademarks expire if not used in commerce for at least 3 years. If nobody's licensing a character, say like Moana Beast, putting him in an issue of Animal Man is an easy way to keep him viable in case somebody ever wants to use him. So comics is basically a self-funding incubator for new intellectual properties in a trademark farm. But let's suppose that Warner decides they don't want to publish comics anymore, and they decide to shut down a DC office and fire all the staff. What then? Based on what other companies have done, there is an obvious answer. They license their characters to another comics publisher, like, for instance, IDW, Dynamite Boom, Ape Entertainment, Image, Dark Horse, Paper Cuts, etc., and give them the permission to DC Comics. The end result would be there will still be DC Comics on the racks, most likely still written and drawn by the very same people who were doing it before, only now there's a second logo on the cover. Warner's still making money off it, and Marvel is still their competition. And that's what will happen. The DC characters are worth millions to billions. He says millions in sales off of T-shirts, bed sheets, lunch boxes, etc., etc., etc. They're worth billions with a B. There's no good reason for Warner to sell these valuable properties. Often if they did, I doubt they would want to sell to their major competitor. If they switched focus from generating content to licensing, their profit would increase and costs would go down. That is why Marvel considered doing it in the 90s. It's why Marvel does it now, actually, because Marvel does this with IDW. They're doing the Star Wars cartoon comics that IDW, that's a Marvel license, a Marvel Disney license. The Marvel action comics, the IDW, that's a Marvel license. It's reprinting the Marvel Adventure stuff, but it's also new content that just started coming out from IDW. That's the so-called animated cartoon type stuff. And there's other licenses that they offer as well. So that would possibly be a thing, but you got to remember, each one of those licenses, it's not going to be for the whole of the DC universe. It's going to be piecemeal because no one can afford the whole shebang. And so you're not, is that anything the fans really want to see happen? Probably not. So chances are, in a worst case scenario, that's what you're going to see. Best case scenario, nothing's going to change, but we'll see. Mm-hmm. We'll get back to Jim's article here. Mm-hmm. But he's talking about Marvel here. He goes, I seriously doubt that Disney wants them. Remember all that licensing revenue I talked about before? Yeah, Spider-Man pulls in about $1.3 billion a year to Disney's piggy bank, and that's with the bulk of the movie money going over to Sony. The rest of the vendors rack up lower amounts, but higher than most of the DC characters who aren't named Batman or Superman. Disney is not in the business of buying licenses, they sell them. There's no reason for them to want to publish licensed DC comics. The profit margin of being a licensing comics publishing is too small for them to waste time on when they can make a lot more money by repackaging their own companies in 100 different ways. See what they're doing with IDW, for example. And of course, Warner would never want to license those comics to Disney, not when they can get a better licensing deal from a smaller, hungrier comics-focused company like Boom or IDW, which, Jim's wrong. Those companies really aren't comics focused anymore. Both of those companies are multimedia, trying to get more licenses to get into their own properties, into film and licensing themselves in more recent year. Disney would push for and get a far more favorable agreement than a small company like Ape Entertainment or Viper Comics will be able to get. Yes, this is true. Again, it's about the money involved. So, I don't really see a platform where anybody is going to buy the licensing as a large piece for any of these characters to do to keep what people want to see, which is the DCU intact. It's just, I don't see it. You're talking about basically building something almost literally 4 or 5 times the size of CrossGen when it launched, to have that kind of capital base to afford it. And to do comics in our market, the way it's structured right now, I don't see it. So, and neither does Jim, rightfully so. Mm-hmm. Of course, the big concern for the fanboys is not monopolies or the increasing consolidation of media in ever fewer hands. No, they just want to see more DC Marvel crossovers, which is probably true. I could care less, but like he says, the fanboys. I'm not really a fanboy. I have some bad news. The days of Marvel and DC crossovers are gone. The last time they did one, Marvel was an independent company and DC functioned with total autonomy within the Warner conglomerate. If the two wanted to do a DC versus Marvel miniseries or Superman versus Hulk or whatever, all they needed to do was have one editor-in-chief, get the other on the phone, work out the details, and it's a go. And you got to remember, that was difficult enough. A lot of times, they had issues and couldn't get that done over the years. Think about how long it took JLA Avengers to get done. But today, Marvel is owned by Disney, and Warner has reorganized the company to create a vertically integrated silo called DC Entertainment, which puts the comics, TV shows, movies, animation, consumer products, licensed merchandise, etc., under a WB executive. What that means is the editor-in-chief no longer has the right to say, let's do a crossover. That conversation would now happen between senior executives, an entire building full of lawyers at Disney and Warner each, and would mostly involve extensive negotiations about reprint rights, use of other media, merchandising, branding, and 100 other topics that have nothing whatsoever to do with the story. Add in a licensee trying to do this, and it gets even more complicated. Everyone at Disney has already acknowledged that it will be impossible to make a sequel to Who Framed Roger Rabbit because of major changes in intellectual property law, policies, licensing agreements, and corporate philosophies, and Roger Rabbit doesn't represent 1/10 of the complications of a DC Marvel crossover. They learned from the previous crossovers. Reprints have to be renegotiated, and tie-in merchandise is a hassle. Where are the paperback versions of the Amalgam universe? Where are the action figures? Well, there have been trade paperback versions of the Amalgam verse, but that's neither here nor there. And the comic by itself, which can't be recycled into a movie or TV series, does not produce enough profit to make it worth doing. Even if Warner outsourced their comics publication business to a licensee, all those contracts and impediments will stay in place. Effectively, it's a non-starter, and that's why Warner is not selling DC to Marvel. It's why DC is not selling to anybody unless somebody else wants to become the new DC. Now, the other thing you got to remember is the cost prohibitiveness of this. When AT&T bought out Warner Media and its subsidiaries, including DC Comics, AT&T was $80 billion in debt. They're currently $188 billion. That's combining Warner Media's debts and their other conglomerates and debts. Now, in order for them to sell off the DC properties and make it worth their time, they're going to have to recoup approximately $110 billion just to make it worth their time. I don't know anybody who's got that kind of money. Do you? If you do, tell them not to waste time buying Time Warner stuff, because there's a whole lot of cool creators out there with creator-owned stuff that would rather sell their stuff for a lot less money. We'll build a whole new universe for you for a lot less cheap, a lot less money, and you can build and have it from the ground up that way if you want. But so I don't see it happening at all. And but Jim summed it up pretty well there, I think. And so we'll go with that as to why we're not going to see that anymore. We got a few more questions. I just got to get to them. There we go. Santos, one of my regulars from Round Lake, Illinois, asks, what do you think of the more recent announcements of the new writers that DC is bringing in to write from... before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and cut this back because Nick said something here I didn't see. Nick says, that's a good way to put it in context. I love the Spider-Girl comics and the MC2 stuff. Passed the baton off at a natural point and worked on its own as a next step. Good thing for new readers, too. I'm not sure exactly what that is. Is that in context of what I had said? Probably what I said with the closing off of different generations of the books. But, yeah, there's that. But also, we've seen different things. I mean, DC's done a tangent universe where they did basically what they did in the Silver Age. Is here's the name of the character, but do a new version of that character. The new Flash, who's a photon, a teenage girl who's made of photons, and Atom, who's a atomic bomb type guy, and the Green Lantern was a Chinese woman who was more like. I'm trying to think of a thing. It's been so long since I read them. More like a House of Mystery type character rather than either one of the Green Lantern with the ring. So there's different ways of going about it and re-envisioning these properties and still have things from different generations. that's what I'd like to see more of. And we keep seeing fandom saying, "Well, we want the old guys back. We want the old guys back." Well, if DC is going to do a generation 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I would love to see some of the guys that are the older generation do the older generation's books, and let the new guys do the new generation. That's how I would do it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's how anybody else would. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and go back to the question here from Santos. Speaking of newer talent, Santos asks, what do you think of some of the more recent announcements of the new writers that DC is bringing in to write from film and TV markets? Do you think that this is a sign of what is to come, where there won't be any comics writers left? Well, first off, we've always had comics writers who also wrote comics. Jerry Conway, and let's see. He's one of the more popular ones. I'm trying to think. Oh shoot, my brain's frying today. I've been working on this show for since 6 o'clock this morning. Yeah. Not Roy Thomas, but Christy Marks was another one. But there's been quite a few who have done both the cartoon writing as well as live action screenwriting as well as comics. And what's happening more modern now is we're just starting in the comics, or starting in film and television and coming over to comics, which is fine. It's not a question of, oh well, they're not comics fans. They're not real comics writers. It has nothing to do with your so-called comics pedigree. It's about whether or not you can tell good stories. And there's a lot of really good writers out there from film and television, from prose fiction markets, that frankly are just better writers than the guys who are basically nothing but comics. Because the comics guys, I'm sorry, but they tend to recycle their own stuff, and they tend to recycle their comic book collections and tell the same stories over and over. We need to get more fresh blood in, Santos, in that respect. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily. It just depends on who we're getting in. Mark Andrew Smith says, on the DC licensing development, a lot of companies complain about the time to develop the comics and how much they're making in the market. Yeah, that's true. Anything with licensing, because having other companies pay to do this for them is a brilliant business move. Yeah, that's it. With licensing, it's kind of like when people buy options from the comics to make a television show. You get an X amount up front for your TV show, for your rights to the TV show for an option, and it's up to them to make it into something and get it sold and get it solicited and produced and distributed. And that's a lot of extra money, cost and time and energy. It could take years. And, a lot of times, probably about 85 to 90% of this stuff doesn't get made when you actually license stuff, or when you option stuff to get stuff made in through licenses. People don't realize that. Some people make a big deal out of The Walking Dead and all the success it's had. What people don't realize is the previous big zombie comic series, Dead World, was optioned 8 times before The Walking Dead was ever even published. And there was never a TV show, there was never a movie made, because the people who optioned it just couldn't get the right people in touch to get it all made. And everybody goes, well, that's because Robert Kirkman's a genius. He was so smart and he did it. wasn't Kirkman, it was Bonaventure, the guy who actually produced the TV show and got the license from Robert that made that success for AMC. And that's what people need to understand. A lot of times, these hits come from parties from outside our market that we don't see as fans because it's all behind the scenes, comparative, and unless you're really into all those markets and know the players, you're not going to know about it. Even when we cover it in news media, you might hear a name, you might see a name in print, but you don't know who they are and what they did. So, but getting back to Santos's question, the writers that he was referring to, these are some of the writers he was actually referring to, because these are the ones. There's about 30 people I know of that are being looked at, and here's 4 of them: Jeffrey Thorne, Kevin Shinnick, Ken Christensen, and Megan Fitzmartin. Now, Jeffrey has actually been in comics for a while. He's done stuff for Dark Horse and Marvel, as well as writing for Disney Plus. He wrote the Avengers cartoon. He was one of the showrunners for the Avengers cartoon for Disney Plus. Did the Avengers Panthers Quest stuff. He did the Mosaic miniseries about the basketball player that was killed, but then he was an Inhuman, so became kind of like Marvel's version of Dead Man. I've been wanting him to do a major, regular, ongoing character for like about 10 years. So if DC's going to give him that, I'm all for that. The other 3 I'm really not that familiar with because I don't watch a whole lot of television myself. I did a little bit of research on them. They're all qualified. There's nothing wrong with any of those people being picked up. If they are brought in, if there's others brought in, it doesn't mean that the comics people are going to be kicked out. But even if it does, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because right now we've got way too many comics writers who are writing for 5 and 6 different publishers at the same time. And if that means they're out of the big 2, or at least out of DC, and they're going to still have their jobs at Image or Dark Horse or Valiant or whatever, they're really not hurting, in my opinion. It just means that there's, now is that going to be a lead into what everybody else does? It shouldn't necessarily, if people learn to understand in this business that if you're going to build a brand for each publisher, you have to have talent pools that are separate and different from one another. That's how you build a brand. It's not just the IPs, it's your talent pools. If everybody publishes the same talent, it gets stagnant and stale, and that's part of what's hurting our industry right now. But we'll see. And that's our last question for the night. So if you have any other questions for future episodes, you can email them to QUOTHTheRaven, lbr72@gmail.com. Subject to your questions, please indicate whether you want your name and locale read on air. And now we will go to the fun part. Why did Didio get fired? Now, some people are saying it's because of the comic movies failing, and some people are saying it's because he had some infighting with Scott Snyder, and the Snyder thing has a little bit of a ring of truth to it. But keep in mind, for the last 10 years, ever since the DC 52. Go back to DC 52. You remember 8 writers left their books because Didio and Jeff Johns were micromanaging the titles and switching things up in mid-production on the writers and telling them they, rewrite everything over and over and over, to the point where these guys just said, no, we're out. This is a historical pattern with Didio, where he micromanages everything. And over the last 3 or 4 years, we've watched every year with DC, we've watched editors get cut. We've watched the art director, Mark Chiarello, leave the company. And basically, there's been a ton of scapegoats every year as Warner Media and now AT&T have looked at it. That's part of, and I'm going to tell you right now, that's why Jeff Johns left as chief creative officer, because he didn't want to lose his spot in the film and television by getting fired. So that's why he left. I'm telling you right now. So the way I look at it is, he had no other people below him other than maybe it was either get rid of Dan Didio or get rid of Jim Lee and Bob Harras. Now, when Didio is more the public face of the company right now, and most people are still holding him accountable more so than Jim Lee. Jim Lee's just the happy-go-lucky, plucky artist that's been there for 30 years, and we still love Jim because he's really not the public figure that Dan is in the market. And Harris has kept his head pretty much down and out of the line of fire as editor-in-chief at DC since he's been in that position. And probably rightfully so. There's really no one else. He had to go this time. There really was no option. Now, did AT&T, Warner Media handle it properly? No, I don't think they did. I think they should have had a more formal exit. More, let them say goodbye, whatever. I don't know. The way they handled it right before Comics Pro, where they're going to have a major presentation to the retailer community. That's not a good thing. But then, AT&T doesn't really understand our business, and Warner doesn't give a damn, to be honest with you. So I'm not surprised by that. But that leads us to what could have been done. Could Didio have prevented this? No, because it was a long time coming. People have been demanding his head for years over this micromanagement problem. And, that's why they kind of made, I think that's part of why they made Jim Lee co-publisher. I think that's part of why they had the three-headed monster with Johns as chief creative officer, was to try and keep him in check. And you can look at the history. There was no other option. So, it wasn't the movies. It was, a 10-year build-up to basically just something coming to a climax that had no other option. I wish they'd done it differently, but I would have probably ended it last year. I would not have got rid of Mark Chiarello as art director. I probably would have cut Dan and Jim and Bob, and I still think that Jim and Bob need to go, because I don't think Dan was really the problem per se. I think Dan and Jim and Bob are just as much of a problem. But we'll get to that in just a moment. The next question, though, is what's next? Who's going to take over? Well, we've had a lot of speculation in that. Let's look at some of the possibilities that we've seen. Okay? I've heard a lot of names, and some of them are just ridiculous, but we'll go through them. The first one I hear a lot of is Mark Waid. My odds for this guy getting it is 300 to 1. First off, he just got promoted to publisher at Humanoids. So I don't see Humanoids necessarily. DC, Time Warner could buy him out, buy Humanoids out for whatever they're paying him and let him leave the company, I suppose. But I don't think they should let him buy him out. I think, you want to pay us an obscene amount of money to get rid of him, okay, sure. But I think they should force Mark to hold his obligations in that respect. But more importantly than that, let's look at Mark's history as a publisher and an editor-in-chief. He failed as a publisher at Boom, or editor-in-chief at Boom. He wasn't publisher, he was editor-in-chief. That's my mistake. He failed at CrossGen. Doesn't he have his own Thrillbent comics brand to run? Yes, he does. Guess what? Where's that at? He's got it online. Where's that? What's going on with that? You never hear anything about it, do you? You want this guy really running DC Comics? I don't see where he's anything special. Third, why the hell would AT&T want this guy when he's in the middle of a lawsuit for not being able to keep his mouth shut and going out of his way to bother a small press publisher, namely Antarctic Press, over a nobody creator, Richard Meyer, whose book was never going to amount to anything and would have if he had just stayed the hell out of it? Think about it. Is that really anybody you want running DC Comics? Not my book. Come on, fandom. You can think better option than Mark Waid. You're thinking of him as a writer. You're thinking of him, well, he wrote these really cool stories back when. Back when. What he did in the 80s and 90s, maybe the early 2000s, but this is 2020. We got other things. We got other options. Let's 300 to 1. Move along. Our next option. Our next options, actually. Jim Lee staying in the position. He's currently the sole publisher. The odds are still 10 to 1. He's going to stay the sole publisher publicly, I think, through the remainder of the year. Whether or not that changes next year will depend on how AT&T's legal team interprets his contractual agreements from when he sold Wildstorm to DC back in 1999-2000. And what I mean by that is Jim does not want to be the publisher. That's why he sold Wildstorm. Okay? It was too much of a headache for him running that company. So he certainly doesn't really want to run and be the head honcho of DC as a publisher. The thing is, though, ladies and gentlemen, he's got to have some sort of control and ownership because of the clause of whatever his sales were to DC of that Wildstorm brand. So either they're going to have to break up the Wildstorm brand, which is going to be really kind of weird, seeing as they just brought Wildstorm back into the DCU recently. Like last year, I think it was. Or they're going to have to buy him out completely. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to have a weird stalemate situation, or they're going to have him find a way to find a co-publisher again, where he can just kind of be co-publisher in name and kind of sort of stay back behind the scenes and be pseudo art director that he is, and pick the people that draw like him. That's what he wants to be. And that's why I say he's part of the problem more than a solution. But that's probably where we're going to stay for the time being. The other thing is Jeff Johns. That's the third option. He's currently in DC Developmental and Television. I have him at 100 to 1 for odds. He's certainly a popular choice, and he's better. But here's the thing: he's better suited working in television. and films. He's just like Dan Didio, micromanagement freak. I'm telling you that right now. If he came back to comics, it would be the same problems as what Dan Didio was, because all the complaining about the micromanagement with Didio, they were saying it about Johns at the same time back in the DC 52 launch. So that's part of why Johns was kind of writing, filling in back and forth, and writing multiple books, because he was getting it his way, and that's why other people were leaving. So, yeah, I don't see him doing that, and I think he's just better off in film and television. Plus, I think his star is dimmed a little bit because of the failures of these movies, like Shazam, and that was his baby. Aquaman did okay; that was his baby too. So he's kind of a mixed bag right now. And since they don't really know what they're doing with the DC network, the streaming network, and what they're going to do with all that stuff, because he has his hands deep in that pile. Depending on where they go with that in the future, whether that's going to be part of AT&T verse, or whether that's going to be part of HBO Max, or whatever they're going to do with that, that's going to determine whether or not Johns is going to stay in film and television or go back to comics as full time. And I still think he's just going to do the television and film, because I think it's just an easier situation for him overall. Bob Harris, the current editor-in-chief. I consider it a terrifying thought. It's entirely possible that they'll be dumb enough to promote him to the top spot, despite the fact that he is the bozo who contributed heavily to the failures of Marvel in the 1990s, which are the exact same causations for the failures in DC in the current era. Like I said before, he's laid low long enough since his debacle at Marvel, worked at the lower tier positions at DC for years to earn the position, and has largely kept himself out of the spotlight as Didio has taken on the public persona of the company. Pray, people, pray that they do some research on their own comics history and their own company and at Marvel's before they make any dumbass decisions. And don't try to defend Harris to me. I dealt with his crap at Marvel. I know how much of a total mess up he is. I got no use for him. Complete. You want to kill DC, that's the best way to do it, in my opinion. Now, got another option. Here's one of our more popular and most likely options right now. Are you ready for it? Are you ready for Scott Snyder? He's a current top 3 writer at DC, and he is considered right now their golden goose talent. Odds are 5-1, in my opinion. Why Snyder? Because they've been grooming him for years to take the role of Jeff Johns held before he bailed for greener pastures in Hollywood. He's been their head of DC's talent developmental group for writers for the past 4 years, which basically means you have to take his writing class or be approved by him if you're going to write for DC. This is part of why he and Didio have been at loggerheads at recent times, because Didio could overrule him. And yet you saw, I'm sure if you've been following the media coverage of this, people asked him, and he's been on social media, and he's saying, oh, no, I had nothing against Dan. I wish him well and everything. He helped me and everything. Even though they had their differences, because that's where he's going. He's got to play that card. He's got to be a political player now, because he's in that consideration right now. That's part of it. And, given that he's that popular, he's basically like Bendis was when Bendis moved to Marvel 20 years ago and was building. And he's not anywhere near his apex, which is a frightening thought. but we'll see. More on Snyder, though. He is your best bet because he's solidly on your comic side. He doesn't seem to have any particular calling to the Hollywooders. He can get along with Johns. He gets along with Berlanti. He gets along with pretty much whoever else DC and Warner Media has. He's popular enough among most of fandom. He should theoretically appease the comics community because he's one of theirs. And it gives the false perception of infusing fresh blood or ideas into the management. And I say that because how can he really be fresh or new when he's already been behind the scenes for years already? But, in terms of the surface of if they were to hire him and put him in that position, it would look like, somebody, he's been there. We know he's worked there, but it's fresh. He'll be in this new place. He's really not. He's been there behind the scenes right along, it's just, like I said, the inner workings of these companies, it's not just one or two guys, it's collectives. But yeah, he's one of your top guys, one of your top choices. And do I think that's a good or bad choice? I don't know. I'm not a big fan of his writing. I don't know. I can't judge him as a executive because I haven't seen him do anything as an executive. As a talent developer, I've had some people who have worked in his workshops through the DC program that weren't so fond of him. I've had other people swear by him. So, I think we'll have to wait and see if he gets there. It'll probably, if he gets in there, it'll be in the next 18 months. But we'll see. Sorry. There we go. All right. Never mind. I just had to get that question and answer thing out of the way. It's starting to annoy me a little bit. Another person that's being talked about is Jeff Lowe. He's a former publisher of Awesome Comics, former president of Marvel Television. He's actually a little bit even more likely than Snyder. Just slightly, though, because he's exiting Marvel's television brands and he's close with Jeff Johns for a lot longer period of time than Scott Snyder has been. There was a point in time where Jeff Johns, Jeff Loeb, and a third party all shared a mutual studio back in the early 2000s for film and television as well as comics. So, and Snyder's only been around the last 5 or 7 years. So, or no, he's been a little bit longer than that. But, he hasn't really, Snyder's only been in the spotlight, I guess you could say, the last 4 or 5 years. So, he's got a stronger track record and is a comics writer. Not stronger, but as strong a record. And he's got a fandom following a little bit, so I don't think there'll be a huge backlash if he gets picked. The one thing that might be a deterrent to him being in charge is keep in mind he did run Awesome Comics with Rob Liefeld, and that could be perceived as a negative. That could be perceived, all the problems that Awesome Comics had. How much of that was Jeff's fault? How much of that was Rob, etc. But that was a while ago. That was the late 90s. So late 90s, early 2000s. So again, let bygones be bygones. Do you remember the history? Whatever. We'll see. Now, of course, this goes back to what we said was never going to happen. And that's if Kevin Feige, currently Chief Creative Officer of Marvel Entertainment, odds 200-1. And this is really only if AT&T decided to shutter the entire published division and license the DC brand to Marvel to publish. Like I said, they're $164 billion in debt as a company. I don't know how they even acquired Warner. I guess it's Trump allowed it. I mean, Trump did something, I guess, that allowed it with the banking laws, or Clinton did, or somebody, because, what the hell, when you're that far in debt, why would anybody allow you to merger companies that are that far in debt with each other? I don't understand that. I'd say, no, you're not qualified to merger. That's me, though. What do I know? But anyway, no, I don't see Kevin Feige doing it, but people are talking about it. And I think after what we reviewed with Jim's article earlier over there at the Atomic Junk Shop, I think we all pretty much know that's a dead horse, unless something were to happen and Feige were to bail on Marvel for some reason. Then, yeah, I could see Feige taking over everything at DC. But I don't see any reason why that would happen either. Seeing as Bob Iger's leaving and quite a few other people are leaving, and Kevin just seems to be getting more and more power base over there. So not going to happen. I shouldn't even give it 200-1. I should say 500-1. But we'll leave it at 200-1 just for shits and giggles, I guess. Brian Michael Bendis is our next choice. And the odds are 30-1. Because he's a current top 5 writer at DC and he has past TV experience. And it's a situation with him because he's kind of an interesting take. People have grown sick of him due to his massive overexposure in the market. He's been massively overused at Marvel. He's massively overused at DC. But you got to remember, at one time he was very, very well received. And he did have success in writing the Spider-Man animated series for MTV. He did have the Powers TV show based on his comic book through Sony on streaming television. He does have some credibility. And like Snyder, he's just a little bit more seasoned than Snyder. But the reason I give him 30-1 is because he's just, as the guy who helped bring him into the business, I know he's just put himself out there too much, and people have gotten so fed up with him that there would be a backlash if he was put in charge, from not just the fandom, but from people within the community. And I don't know how well he would handle that. And because he's really not the business guy, he's more the creative. His wife handles the business side of it. And, I don't know. So for that reason, I give him a 30-1. But you got to remember, he's, DC didn't think highly enough of him to give him his own print, Wonder Comics. And I think that's kind of a test run to see where he might take things. That having been said, have any of those titles blown up sales charts? No, they haven't. But he hasn't had any major names or character properties associated with that imprint either. So the question is, has he proven enough to be given the reins if he wants it? And the question is, if he were to be given it, would the industry react to him negatively? And if so, could he overcome that and be successful in an executive position? And I don't know the answer to that. I really don't, because his personality doesn't strike me as that kind of a guy, but you know, I actually see his wife doing a better job than him. I hate to say that, but, well, I don't really hate saying it. I mean, it's just his wife is actually quite savvy businesswoman. So, um, if I was going to have that um, consideration, um, you know, but no, I would rather see Brian actually cut down in power and cut down in workload. To be honest, I think he's overworked, overused, and I hate to say overrated because he really is a very talented writer. I just think he's done so much, put out so much stuff at once that he's fallen back on habits and tropes rather than really been able to do his best work over the years. And nobody's really realized that and given him hell for it. and, so we'll see. Who else we got? Ah, the real one. And this is the thing. Uh, someone yet unrevealed. Odds 5-1. Now, if it were me, I'm AT&T on Time Warner, I wouldn't pick any of these options. To me, Wade Harris and Loeb have all proven to be failures as publishers in the past. Like I said, I think Bendis has too much of an ego. I don't want him in charge. Feige wouldn't be a bad choice if he was coming over from Marvel, but to have DC being licensed to Marvel, we've already gone through that. But even if for some crazy thing Disney was going to buy the licensing rights and everything worked out that way, doing it would be disastrous for the comic book industry because that would equivocally give Marvel something like what would it be? Something like 82% of the market share through Diamond. So we don't need that. So you might as well just kill the direct market if that ever happened. So no, it'd be disaster. And in my opinion, Johns needs to stay in Hollywood. I can't place, from what I've seen of Snyder as a writer and talent developer, I don't place enough stock in him. That leaves us with, well, who are you going to pick then? I think that AT&T needs to realize that you need to rebrand the publishing arm. And you can't rebrand by utilizing those who are already part of the problem. Now, I can list a variety of publishing professionals and multimedia professionals who have worked in comics in the past but aren't so-called major players, who they'd be largely considered to be outsiders. And maybe I'll do that next week if there's enough demand for it from people out there listening and watching. I'm not going to do it tonight because I would have to go and give an explanation for each person because you won't know who they are, folks. But I'll give you an example. Keach Johnson. I got 3 people watching. Any of you know who Keach Johnson is? Give me a yay or nay in the chat room. If you know who Keach Johnson is, let me know. I'm going to let you guys think about it for a little bit. But if you haven't, I'll give you until, let's see, I'll give you another minute or two to look her up or something. But that's just one example. I have like 10 or 15 people, but I would want someone if I was AT&T Warner, who has publishing experience outside of comics, not just comics experience, because I want someone who understands how to market to bookstores outside of comic shops. I want someone who has video game and computer platform um, app development experience so that we can get the digital comics and digital platforms restructured. I'd want someone who has licensing experience in other markets such as the gaming, art role playing game, card collectible card games. Um, I'd want someone who has experience with um, film and television also. That's Keach Johnson. She's got them all. Okay. She's got all. She's worked in all those platforms throughout her career, and I'm not gonna. Like I said, that's just one person. I could go with Jason Sizemore. Jason's probably a little bit of a long shot, but he's not healthy right now, unfortunately. But if he was healthy, I definitely want to give him a shot at running it. There's quite a few other small press guys that have started building up their own imprints in the book publishing world on the digital platforms and print on demand that have new ideas that would be more marketable to structure, restructure what DC could do on all their various platforms digitally and physically for physical print platforms and distribution. And I think it would also allow them to start looking at um, a stronger examination of what's going on with the crowdfunding market, um, because a lot of those people do crowdfunding in their own rights, and they know that platform better than the people that actually work for Marvel and DC, because those people are corporate funded and corporate sponsored and stuff. So I'd want to have some of those guys in that arena coming in and revitalizing the corporate structure, because the corporate structure is trying to, I guess you could say, narrow bandwidth everything, tunnel vision everything. And that's part of why they aren't selling things anymore in the comic book industry, because it's just too much of a niche market and who they're targeting and what they're targeting. So that's why I would rather see some of those parties. And I named two with Keej and Jason, but I could give 10 or 15 examples, but I just don't want to explain all their background tonight. We got a lot more to talk about. Whoops. Okay, wrong thing. So that's pretty much my thoughts on the Didio and DC status right at the moment. Any questions from the viewership right now before we get into our reviews for the week? Well, I haven't seen anybody say anything or heard anything yet, so I'm going to go ahead and go on with our reviews for now. And we're going to start with the DC reviews for the week. We got quite a few reviews this week. We got something like 14 reviews. So if you guys want to take a break and come back at a later time, call it a night and come back and watch the rest of the episode when it's done, you can do that. Just make sure you hit like before you leave or hit your subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already. But we're going to start with the reviews now. We're going to start with the DC books that I got recently. And we're going to start with Amethyst #1. It was $3.99. The writer-artist was Amy Reeder. The editor is Andy Corey. The genre is superhero fantasy, and it was released this week, yesterday, February 26, 2020. This is the Wonder Comics imprint. This is the imprint that Bendis actually oversees. Amethyst, what it's about, is Amethyst, the lead character, torn between her life as princess in Gemworld and a normal human existence, returns to her kingdom in another dimension on her birthday, only to find it ransacked and her loved ones gone. Searching for clues as to what happened, Amethyst travels to the neighboring kingdom of Turquoise, but the rulers don't take kindly to her mission. They're definitely hiding something. Amethyst suspects the involvement of the evil Dark Opal and sets off on a quest to get to the bottom of this mystery. This book is recommended for ages 13 up. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And we're going to take a quick look at some of the artwork for it. This is This is where she's seeing her human parents, adopted parents. And Nick Cagnetti says, "Good show, Lewis. I'll catch the reviews a bit later, but this has been enjoyable." Yeah, that's what I figured. Most people would want to go ahead and catch the reviews a little bit later because we've been on the show for a little over an hour, and people have things to do, and that's cool. And I appreciate that, Nick. And you guys, you have a good night, and I hope we'll catch you later, Nick. And Mark Andrewsman says, "I'm watching, but don't have a comment." That's cool. I respect that, Mark. But this their pages, and it's her birthday, and she gets an outfit, and they gave her a book on crystal healing, which is kind of a joke thing in a way because all the stuff that we supposedly think about with crystals and the powers of crystals and stuff like that is not how it works. And she knows that because she's from Gemworld. So they were trying, but but anyway, after that, she decides she needs to get home to Gemworld, and that's where she's heading out, is out there. Yeah, it's okay. I don't really care for the expression on her face as she's going through the magical portal to Gemworld, but okay, whatever. It's not the worst. And then there's a 2-page spread of her traveling through as she's going from one place to the next, and it shows different versions of different iterations of the character in the past, different dimensional eras, I guess you could say, of the character before she lands in her stuff. Amy Reeder's art is okay. I hadn't really looked at it before. I knew I'd heard of her. I'd seen her work before, but I was not a major fan by any means. I just wanted to give it a shot. I'm one of those type of people that I don't automatically just knock off a book because it's done by a woman or because it's done by someone who's not a white male. I've seen this character been done before. I've heard a lot of people like the gentleman who did the article that we read earlier, Jim McCory. He's been big on having an Amethyst Gem World type character book for a long time. I don't know if this is up his alley, but I don't think it is actually. But you know, there you go. They're trying. You know, the thing is, it's still pretty much a setup. Everything's kind of just precursor to what's going on, and I think that's typical of a first issue these days, but that's kind of what makes it kind of an average comic too. So that's kind of why I gave it the 3 stars out of 5. It's just average because of that. I just um, I don't want to say it's too slow a pace because it's not too slow of a pace. It's just the way comics are often written today, particularly for the big two. They just there's a certain pace. It's just kind of just meanders along, gets to where you know whether it's writing, whether we call it writing for the trade or whatever. It's just a certain cadence of pace and how they write the scripting, and I don't know. I'd like to see some people do a little more um, quicker pacing with some of the stuff. So we'll see in the future. Mm-hmm. Our next book is Far Sector number 4, 399, written by Nora K. Jemison and K. Jemison. Artist is Jamal Campbell. The genre is science fiction superhero. This was also released yesterday, February 26, 2020. Misspelled February. What it's about, with the so-called Peace Division firing upon the protesters it's meant to protect, new Green Lantern Joe Moline devises a novel solution to bring the chaos to a close, one that causes the rookie Lantern to run afoul of the City Enduring's Leadership Council. We also learn more about Joe's recruitment into the Green Lantern Corps and the nature of her mysterious and unique power ring. This is a mature reader's book from a DC Young Animal imprint, ages 17 and up. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Let's take a quick look at the artwork. This is pretty interesting about how she's blocking them, getting into fights and blocking the guys. I did not care for this particular first page on the left. If you look at this real quick, and now I want you to think of the movie Independence Day with Will Smith, where he knocks out the alien with one punch. That's what this whole scene is. And that annoys the crap out of me. I got to be honest. Um, that did take me out of the book right away. And that is not something I expected from Jamal Campbell. That was a weak page, very weekend start to the book. Fortunately, as the book progresses, it gets better. So, that was just something that was really unexpected and a little bit of a disappointment from Jamal and Nora on that one. That should not have happened. And the editor should have caught that and said, "Hey, come on." It's okay to do an homage to something, but there's a difference between doing an homage to something and doing something that's like a blatant ripoff. They could have done better than that. I did like the rest of the stuff, and again, you really can't see what's being said here in the discussion. But what is being said here is The order to fire came directly from the council. These people are breaking the law. And she says, so we're doing summary execution now for protesting? You know, no, not, you know, so basically, like I said, you know, I only did a little bit of artwork for this right here because I didn't have time to get more stuff scanned in, unfortunately. But it is a very well done political drama, which the book has been right along, and it's still probably the best written Green Lantern I've seen since the early '90s when Gerard Jones was writing the character. Um, Prior to the Hal Jordan going nuts stuff, but I guess you could say that late '80s, early '90s relaunch of Hal Jordan when he was just getting relaunched after the Crisis stuff. Um, so you know, I like that one. Okay. Next book is Plunge, and this is part of the Hill House Comics lineup from DC. The writer is Joe Hill. Artist is Stuart Immonen. The colorist is Dave Stewart. The genre is horror. This was released a week ago, February 19th, 2020. And what it's about is in the aftermath of a devastating tsunami, an exploration vessel known as the Derleth begins sending an automated distress signal from a remote atoll in the Bering Strait. The only problem is the Derleth has been missing for 40 years. Marine biologist Mariah Lamb joins the Carpenter salvage team to recover Derleth's dead, only to find in this remote part of the Arctic Circle, the dead have plenty to say to the living. This is another book that's 17 and up, you know, black label. And I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. This is the first few pages of the. I don't know if this is the actual first 2 pages, I forget, but some of the artwork by Stuart Immonen. Mm-hmm. And you see these giant squids up on the beach in the ocean. I just, you know, pretty wild looking stuff there, you know. And there's Mariah dealing with a shark, and they're talking about the wreck here. I don't have the actual lyric. I took the images, not the actual pages with the script on them in this one because I was again, I didn't have time to scan everything the way I wanted. I had to do a lot of piecemeal stuff this week. I had so much stuff that I had to go ahead and put together for this show. So I apologize for that, but it gives you a good look at what Stuart's art is. Stuart is one of the, I guess I would call him one of the more advanced artists in the industry right now. He has multiple styles that he can work in, but you know, he's just, you know, he's got something that stands out about him more so than others, in my opinion. And since he's sort of semi-retired, I guess, recently, from what he said, he's not going to do a lot of mainstream superhero stuff anymore. To get him on any comic is a bonus. So I'll go ahead and give this a 4 for now. It's a good, again, though, it's still a setup issue. It's not a, it's you know, it's good pacing though. Possibly because Joe Hill isn't a traditional comics writer, but you know, we'll see. Yeah, for first issue, it's really good though. 4 out of 5. Our last DC book of the week is Zatanna and the House of Secrets, original graphic novel. Let me go ahead and take off the TV16 for a moment. It is $9.99. This is a all ages or 10 and up DC Kids brand for graphic novel. The writer is Matthew Cody. The artist is Yoshi Tani. The genre is teen superhero. I forgot the release date. I couldn't find it. Recently, though, I think it came out in either late January or early February. I think I've had it a couple weeks. Um, what it's about. Um, Zatanna and her professional magician father live in a special house, the House of Secrets, which is full of magic, puzzles, mysterious doors, and storybook creatures. It's the house everyone in the neighborhood talks about but avoids. Not that Zatanna cares, though, because she's a perfectly content girl. But at school one day, Zatanna stands up to a bully and everything changes, including her friends. Suddenly, Zatanna isn't so sure about her place in the world, and when she returns home to tell her father he's gone missing, lost within her own home, she must discover who she is to find him. Recommended for ages 10 and up. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Hopefully, this is showing up good. Very colorful art by Yashitani. First two comic book pages on the left and middle are early in the book. The last one's a little bit later in the storyline. The blue kid is actually Clarion the Witch Boy. And the rabbit is talking to her because that's kind of like her familiar. I don't want to really give much away for the story. But basically, Clarion's mother, the Witch Queen, wants the key that you probably can't see, but I'll see if there's a little key right there wrapped around the rabbit's neck that kind of gives you access to a certain door in the House of Secrets to the controlled death, and it's up to her to stop Clarion's mother. Mm-hmm. And there is Clarion's mother. And, I thought the book was really well. I'll go ahead and do it this way. I thought the book was really well done. I love the artwork on it. Very painterly, very well represented for all ages. I know there's a lot of people out there who like to crap all over DC and Marvel for doing anything that isn't, I guess you could say, marketable to 40 or 50 something white males. I don't know. It's just, I've seen a lot of people trashing, not this book specifically, but just anything that like this. It's like, what do you mean DC and Marvel are doing books for kids? Well, that's how they should be doing. So, screw you, Zach. Richard Meyer, whatever you're calling yourself this week. Yeah, just really well done book. I hope it receives some recommendations for maybe not an Eisner, but I wouldn't be surprised if it got some award nominations later in the year. It is that good of a book. And that is our DC reviews for the week. We will now go on to some other publishers. We'll start with The Kill Lock from IDW. The writer-artist is Livio Romandelli. The genre is science fiction. Just came out yesterday. What it's about is this is the middle of the story. It's like a 5 or 6 issue series. Continuing their search for a cure by seeking out one of the kill lock creatures, the bots. There's a group of 4 robots that are bound by this kill lock. If they get far enough away from each other or whatever, they'll explode. So anyway, they wind up in a world that was decimated by one of their own, and that's the guy that's on the cover. That's the big warrior robot of the group. Meanwhile, the group's most dangerous member, the artisan, decides it's time to take over the education of the youngest, the kid. Recommended for 13 up. Rating is 5 stars. This really is one of the best comics going on the market right now. If you're not reading it, you probably are going to have a hard time getting the back issues on it. You might have to wait for the trade. But definitely get this book. It's beautifully well done. I didn't have a chance to get things scanned. Almost every review I've seen of this book online for this particular issue had no artwork for it. I don't understand why. It's just everybody. I guess everybody was just so enamored by the story and what's going on with the story of it. They just wanted to talk about the story and not show the art. But it's just that well done. And right now I don't have the book. I thought I had the book by me, but I don't. So I can't step away for a minute and go get it. But normally I would, but I don't have a guest to keep you occupied like I did last week. But anyway, definitely one of the better series of this thing started coming out in December, I believe. Yeah, this is the 3rd issue. So this is one of the better series of IDW has had. And when you see IDW's Chris Royale talking about stuff going well for them, or what they're doing right, this is one of the books they're doing. This is what IDW is doing right. So let's see what else they got. They're also publishing Usagi Yojimbo Classics #2 for $3.99. This came out yesterday. Writer-artist is Stan Sakai. Colors are by Rhonda Pattison, pardon me. The genre is anthropomorphic samurai adventure. And what it's about is Usagi recalls tales of his youth and his mentor, Katsuchi. 5 stars. Usagi Yojimbo is one of the best comics of the past 35 years, period. And IDW is just reprinting the original stories that were originally printed in black and white and full color. It's the perfect jumping on point to the character. You get to see the early stuff from the 80s. This is actually originally story done in 87 that's being reprinted in color for the first time. And it's just beautiful, beautiful stuff. And these are some of the pages. And Usagi's talking to his friend. And then this is when he was a little boy and he's talking to his mentor, the lion samurai. And he's talking to his sensei about how he wants to fight brigands and go off to war and stuff. He's like, that's not what it is. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's very well done, very well written. He's talking to Usagi about, how the sword reflects the soul of the warrior, and the best souls are the ones that keep their swords in their scabbards and stuff like that. So it's pretty well done. I really do enjoy the Usagi stuff. I read it when I was a kid, and unfortunately, I had to sell my black and whites back in the years to help pay for college. So just getting them back in color, just to have some of that stuff is just is really a pure joy for me. Uh, yep. And Mark Anderson says Usagi holds up so much better over time than other 80s comics, being about a rabbit. No feathered hair or 80s clothes, timeless. Well, it's not, it's not about the 80s. I mean, that story is really about, like I say, it's timeless, but it's about feudal Japan too. I mean, all that stuff is about that era of the samurai code, and all the characters are of that um, era. So it's, like you say, it's not quite the difference. I mean, um, at least he wasn't going cowabunga, give me a pizza slice, dude. I'm just not. Yeah, I often wish that Stan Sakai had gotten the success that the Turtles did, because his book is so much better than Turtles ever have been. I never was, but oh well. No accounting for taste, people. You know, Often what becomes popular is stuff is what we call lowest common denominator. So, but yeah, those are our two IDW books this week. Both of them I would have to give 5 stars, 4 or 5 stars to, and you know, IDW's doing things right when they do those creator-owned series. So definitely check those out. Let's see what else we got. We've got Image Comics this week. We got Family Tree number 4, $3.99. Writer is Jeff Lemire. The artists are Phil Hester, Eric Gapster, and Ryan Cody. Before we do that, Mark says that Usagi should be as popular as Bone. I bet if Stan Sakai had made a deal with Scholastic Books, he would be. That's the thing. Dark Horse always had the rights for the trades for so long, until recently. And now IDW has the reprint rights, and they're doing the singles. I don't know if Dark Horse has rights for trades still or not. But if he got in with Scholastic, and got the power of what Scholastic's distribution is, he could get into the schools. I bet he would go as popular as Bone, or maybe even, well, I don't want to compare him to be equal to the Telgemeier books either, but yeah, he would be up there, almost certainly, I think. But then there's, popular in that arena is not the same as being popular in comics, mainstream comics, because of course Bone was popular in comics, but then he really exploded when he became more children's book. And when you look at some of Jeff Smith's other stuff like Razzle, even though it was produced straight up as booklets, or not comics but as books, not as popular because the content was more adult and not towards something that they could sell through Scholastic as much. So, unfortunately, some stuff like that, we have the market that we have to figure out a way to sell it and distribute it better. And the only thing I can think of right now, that we're not, is like the Time Life books. I think I've mentioned that before on this program, where you just you put everything on Time Life Books. You do an introductory book, and then each week or each month or whatever, you send more books and keep the ones you want, cancel anytime type situation. But how well is that going to work today? I don't know. I know I would be all for it, but then I was all for it with the Science Fiction Book Club and Readers Weekly when I was a kid and stuff like that. I don't know today because it's kind of a weird thing. They don't really do that as much. I know they do it with records and CDs and stuff, but they aren't doing it with books like they used to. Gotta find out why. Well, next book. We're going to go to Image. Family Tree number 4, $3.99. Jeff Lemire's writer, Phil Hester, Eric Gapster, and Ryan Cody are the artists. The genre is horror. Came out last week. What it's about, Grandpa Judd and Loretta, that's the mother of the group, are close to a reconciliation of sorts, just as the crazed and deadly arborist closing is in on their Chinatown hideout, and they protect their kids from the forces that would destroy them. In past, I'd recommended it for 15 up. It's getting a little bit too much cuss words, a little bit too much mature readers, so I put it up to ages 17 up. And I had given it 4 stars in the past. In earlier episodes, I gave this one a 3 out of 5. The storyline is not as strong as I would hope it to be. I'm probably gonna lose interest in another issue or two. I hate to say that, but I'm gonna hold on to it until the first issue ends. I guess 4th, 6th issue, probably 6 issues, and I'm probably gonna stop. But we'll have to wait and see. But this is the artwork for it. That's Grandpa talking to someone, and as you can kind of tell, there's different things blocked out a lot. The reason it's blocked out, I didn't block it out, and it's not blocked out in the comics. It's like I said, I had to do a little cut and paste off of other people's reviews and other stuff off the net, and everybody else is blocking them off. So, apparently, and that's another thing. A little bit too much cussing in the book, and I don't know. I mean, it's not wrong to put the cussing in the book. It's just, I don't know. It's just there. The concept sounds like someone was smoking weed and wrote their idea down. Lemire seems to write a lot of comics. Yeah, Lemire has a lot of books out. The family tree thing is, if you haven't been following the series, Mark, it turns out the girl is growing a tree out of her body. And her father did the same thing. And that's why her father abandoned them years before. And that's why her mom's now trying to protect her, single mom and stuff. But yeah, the one thing I don't really care for is like they're like the Groots or something. Just yeah, it's okay, but I don't know. Yes, the layout for the artwork is nice. I think Phil Hester's a very good artist. Uh, Gapster is the colorist, I believe, on this. You can see on the right page how the girl's left arm is turning into the wood, and her feet's got the twigs coming out of it and other places and stuff. But that's kind of what it is. And there's no changing her back to human. That's what they're having an argument between her mom and the special person that's supposed to be treating her there. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, the layout for those pages. Um, Everything on the book is good as far as that goes, but for me, I think what it is that after 4 issues in, it just feels average. And like you say, Jeff Lemire's running a lot of comics out there, too many comics in my opinion, um, and it just it feels a little bit flat. So it's just kind of average, and that's why it's only got a 3. Whereas it started out, I gave it like a 3.5 to 4, and it's just kind of slowly, but kind of fading off because he's just got too much work on his plate between the Black Hammer stuff and that all the spin-offs he's doing over there. He's doing stuff for DC like The Question. He's doing this book and 2 other books, I believe, on top of that. So it's just too many for my taste in that respect. And again, that doesn't mean he's a bad person or a bad writer. It just means that he, like so many other writers in the market today, are just overworked. And whether that's because they aren't getting paid enough and they just want to get as much out as they can to get money in, or if it's just because nobody knows how to guide them as editors and get the best out of them rather than, I'd rather have the quality rather than the quantity. I don't know. It's a real problem in our industry right now. And I don't want to pick on Jeff personally, because it's not just Jeff. This is Jeff. This is Cullen Bunn. This is Bendis. This is Snyder. This is Wade. This is just, on and on and on the list goes. But, just too many of them. But, yeah. Go on to the next book. It sounds like Lemire should trim some of the apple blossoms so the other apples grow better and tastier. Yeah, to use a tree metaphor. Yeah, there you go. Um, you know, but it's not necessarily Jeff's fault. Because, like I say, people have to enable him and other writers to do this. If the editors would stop enabling it and say, okay, and not even say, well, this, and the other thing is, to be fair, and this, Mark, because for others who are watching this show later, Mark's a comics writer himself, and he's done quite a few books himself. But you might have something in development for years and be done and have something written for years and sitting in a drawer somewhere before it actually gets released. So we don't know. Yeah, Image can get put into a spot where they can't say no. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, because there are no editors, really, projects get approved or not across the board. And, that's just it. There isn't, like you say, Eric Stevenson is your gatekeeper, for lack of a better word. Yes or no? And that's the thing. They need to have someone more than just him, I guess. Well, yeah. Well, that's again. Yeah. Yeah. He says, it could be a pet idea. They don't want to turn it down because he might take it good. Well, that could be true of Boom or IDW or Dark Horse or Oni or any other companies he gets published at. They're all in the same boat as Image, if you know what I mean. And if that's the case with all of them, then really nobody who's running these companies is really doing their job. If you take my meaning, because you got to know, no matter about keeping good relationships or not, there's so many other writers and artists and content out there that's worth pursuing. To say, well, I got to keep this relationship with this guy or this gal, so we got to do this book that's maybe not so good. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I know where you're coming from, Mark, but at the same time, you got to be able to say, hey, you've got enough on your plate too. Or hold on to that. We want to do it, but we don't want to do it right now. Can we do this down the road? Type thing even. And, wait until the guy has slowed down a little bit and say, hey, that story that you pitched us back a while ago that we didn't do yet, where's that at? Let's take another look at it or something. You got to have enough sensibility to, like I said, guide a writer or guide a talent so that they're actually doing their best work when it comes, and not, whether it's a pet project or not, everything you want to do is, not everything's going to be gold no matter what we do, but we want to do something with you that hopefully we're getting, the best you we can get out of you at the time. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I just don't. I don't know. It's for me. It's, as an editor, I want something. If something's not the best, I know you can do. I'm going to tell you. But like you say, a lot of these books they're just doing it on their own. So I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. Let's go on to the next story here. Heart Attack number 4, $3.99. Writer was Sean Kittleson. Artist is Eric Zawadzki. Colorist is Mike Spencer. Letterer is Pat Rousseau. Genre is science fiction superhero. It was released yesterday, February 26th, 2020. What it's about. Our couple have eluded capture temporarily. Sorry about the misspelling there. But distrust threatens to cost them their lives. They become the faceless heroes of the revolution against the government. At what cost? Jill and Charlie have lots of decisions to make, and make them fast, because revolution is not going to wait for them. Recommended for ages 16 and up, rating 3 out of 5 stars. I've already said in my reviews of this particular series, this is a knockoff of The Gifted. It's the Fenris twins. And I don't know when this book was originally accepted by Image. I don't know. It is just so freaking obvious that it's. I mean, I'm burned out on it. I have to admit, I don't know if I'm even going to bother with the rest of the story arc. Mm-hmm. I'm giving it 3 out of 5 because it's consistent with what it's been. It hasn't dropped in quality, and I've been giving it 3 out of 5 pretty consistently throughout the run on the book. But really, as far as my interest, it's like a 1.5. Because it's like, show me something new. Where's this going that I haven't seen? And it's not there. It's just not there, unfortunately. And I guess maybe I'll finish it. Maybe I won't. I don't know. But we'll look at the art some more. This is the first 3 pages of this issue. They had just escaped being captured. They're having an argument. She's saying she can't trust him. He's saying, hey, wait a minute. I'm not what you think, and it's not, you can trust me. They're, of course, being watched by cameras, and the tech people are now reporting it to the cops, the government. Um, and then the person who's like the mayor comes in at the bottom right corner to talk to the chief of police to let him know that he hasn't paid his um, what he's supposed to do to help promote um, certain payola and other stuff like that, politics stuff going on. And basically, he's like, well, we need to find out whether or not these two are legitimate superpower freaks and if they're going to do anything or not. And she's like, I already know they're not, and this, that, and the other. And by the end of the episode, end of the issue, they've actually done something where they've actually proven to be a threat. So now maybe in the next issue and the issue after that, 5 and 6, we might see something actually happen. I don't know. But it just, for 4 issues, I've been just waiting on this book. And, I never want to give a bad review on something. I never want to say something isn't worth people's time. If you liked The Gifted, if you remember the Fenris twins from the X-Men of the 80s, you might like this stuff. For me, I'm kind of like, give me something else, unfortunately. I'll continue to finish it out through the arc because, well, I just so I have the whole set to sell it as a set later if I need it. I probably, but for me, it's just I'm pretty much done with it as a reader. I think. I don't know. Well, I'll wait and see. I might try the 5th issue, read it, or I might just get the 5th and 6th and just put it in the set and never look at them. We'll find out. Our next book is Tartarus, number 1. It was a double-sized issue. It's $5.99. Writer is Johnny Christmas. Artist is Jack T. Cole. Letterer is Jim Campbell. Editor is Stephanie Cook. Genre is science fiction. Came out on February 12th. What it's about is the city of Tartarus has been under constant attack by warlords in the Galactic Empire. In this 2-part introduction, we are introduced to warlord Circa, who starts a prison break and escapes with a small army of prisoners behind her. She reunites with her baby and prepares for a final countdown with the Galactic Empire. Cut to 17 years later, and we are introduced to Tilda, who, unbeknownst to her, is Circa's daughter, and thus she must either kill herself in the name of the Empire or rebel against the Empire because of who she is and because of her relationship being a person that was against the Empire and being blood relation. It's an automatic death sentence. Recommended for ages 16 and up. Rating 4 out of 5 stars. It's a good solid first issue. Here's some of the artwork. Jack T. Cole's art is kind of European looking to me. Has a kind of an Italian, not Mobius, but some of the Benelli comics from Italy. It reminds me of some of that kind of artwork. The coloring is really well done here. I like the color palette on this particular stuff right here. Storyline, kind of okay with it. 48 pages for a setup is a little bit long, and I'm afraid that the next issue isn't going to be 48 pages. I think it's going to be regular pages for $3.99. But and then here's another page setup. again, this is the part of the breakout. I do like the artwork for it, like I said, but storyline a little bit long, for a little bit slow, I think. But we'll see where it goes. It's only the first issue, and for first issue, it's well done for what it is. The last image book for the week is The Clock, #2, Top Cow brand, off of Image. Writer is Matt Hawkins. Artist is Colleen Dorn. The genre is science fiction horror. Came out on February 12th. What it's about: when aggressive cancer begins spreading throughout humanity like a virus, one scientist will sacrifice anything for answers. This is a global eugenics conspiracy, the beginning of World War III, and can he get to the bottom of it before he takes what's left of his family? Ages 15 and up, rating 4 out of 5 stars. Take a quick snap look at the first 3 pages of art by Miss Doran. At the end of the first issue, the scientist gets hit with a guy who gives him a note that says his wife who died of this cancer, was murdered. And so he's trying to find out information, and he took this to the cops to say, hey, I've been told that my wife was actually murdered. Cops don't want to really listen to him. He goes to labs, gets some stuff, gets information about his wife's DNA and samples, and gives it to his buddy. And he's trying to deal with other things in this issue with his family, his daughter. And ultimately the government starts saying, hey, he's getting too close to what's going on here. We gotta stop him. They don't exactly show what, though, in this issue. So I'm not going to give any spoiler alerts or anything on it, but it's doing okay. Hawkins is pacing the story well. Colleen Dorn's drawing it well. I don't know how many issues this is going to run. I think it's only going to run 5 or 6 issues. For the second issue, though, it's really doing pretty well for this stuff. I only did this particular artwork here, and if I was going to show you other artwork for it, I'd only be spoiling the storyline for you, unfortunately, so I can't. But that's our image releases for this week. We have a few more books that we're going to show. Let's try and get through them as quickly as possible because we're well over 2 hours. Canopus #1, Publisher Scout Comics, it's $3.99. Writer artist is David Chisholm. Genre science fiction. Release date is February 19th out of this year. What it's about: astronaut Dr. Helen Sterling wakes up marooned on a lifeless alien planet 300 light years from Earth with no memories beyond a hazy sense of extinction level urgency to return to Earth. Joined by Arthur, her strange robot companion, she explores the planet to find materials necessary to repair her ship. She discovers that she needs to reach a mineral deposit 10 miles away if she has any hopes of making it home. The pair set off to find a deposit. Along the way, Arthur discovers a pit filled with stuffed animals and toys that Helen recognizes. But how? She flashes back to a memory of her late father who died on a mission to Mars. Is this all in her head? Is she dying or already dead? Recommended for ages 13 and up. Rating 4 out of 5 stars. This is our artwork here. This is where she's just walking from her spaceship in the background there. You see Arthur bounding up and down. uh, and this is where he actually goes and finds the hole with the toys in it. She goes in and she finds this one toy that is hers. As you can see, impossible. You know, um, I think it's a great first issue. Very psychological story, psychological science fiction. Um, Feels very Ad Astra ish. So if you didn't like Ad Astra, you might not like this book. But if you like the um, psychological mind fuck, I guess you could say, of what the hell's going on. Is this character alive or dead? Is what's happening, type thing. Then yeah, the book's for you. And I like that kind of thing, and I enjoyed Ad Astra, so this is my kind of comic. I like the kind of uh, stuff there. Artwork by Chisholm is a little bit. I won't say it's wonky. It's just different. I mean, the eye expressions that she's got there with her eyes kind of bulged out there in the center and bottom center, a little bit too extended to me in that particular page, but not the end of the world. Um, you know, it's got a nice open thing, open style to it. Kind of reminiscent of artists like, oh heck, what's his name? Mike Allred. Um, Even I think Nick Cagnetti would probably appreciate this art a little bit. It's kind of in his wheelhouse. I think maybe um, Nick was watching the show earlier, but you know, it's interesting, and the story is very interesting to me, and I'm hoping to get to see. I'm going to follow this one more so than I would some of the other ones that I've seen from Scout. Our next book is Cosmo the Mighty Martian #4, publisher Archie Comics, $3.99. The writer is Ian Flynn, the artist is Tracy Yardley, colorist is Matt Helms, letterer is Jack Morelli. Genre is science fiction adventure, just came out this week. Cosmo and his team are on a mission to find the mysterious Martian relics. The crew hopes they can finally put an end to the evil antics of the Venusian army, but what will Cosmo do when he learns that the final relic resides in the one place they don't dare enter, the castle of Queen Hesper on Venus? Recommended for ages 7 and up. I said 7, but it's an all ages type comic. 5 stars. This is a perfect kids comic. The cover is by Yardley. It's a little bit kind of a weird Photoshop thing. I'm used to seeing Yardley do more of a line art type stuff, but it's interesting looking. It looks like a video game type box cover. It's cool. I'm more used to his artwork looking like this, so but yeah, story's pretty cool. It's been following pretty well so far. Um, The characters are just amusing as a collective. I've talked about this book before. It's something I recommend for pretty much most of the kids, and a lot of Archie books. I mean, everybody thinks Archie's for all stuff for kids, but they're not anymore. A lot of their stuff has become adulterated, become more late teen, 20s adult stuff. Um, you know, you guys have seen the Riverdale TV show. In Sabrina TV show. They've kind of ruined it for kids. This they haven't. This is still for kids, and um, you know if your kid has gone to see that Sonic the Hedgehog movie, and they're looking for something like that is fun and where the guy has teammates and everybody has cool stuff to do and things. This is the kind of book that you want to get them. So that would be my recommendation for that. Our next book is called Snapdragon. It is a graphic novel from First Second Books. There's two versions. The paperback, which I got, was $12.99, and a hardcover edition for $21.99. The writer-artist is Kat Lee of Lumberjanes fame. The genre is teen adventure. There's two ISBN numbers, 978-1250-171115 for the trade paperback, and 978-1250-171122 for the hardcover. This was released a few weeks ago on February 5th. Snapdragon, usually known as Snap, is a feisty little girl. She's a good kid and a big help to her single mom, but she just does not fit in, especially at school. Jax is a feisty old lady with an eye patch. Everyone in town says she is a witch. When Snap rescues a litter of orphaned possums, she brings them to Jax, and the older woman agrees to care for them as long as Snap helps her with her work. This is where an already weird story gets weirder. Jax takes the buried roadkill and sells reconstructed skeletons on the internet, but Snap learns that Jax really is a witch, setting the spirits of the animals free when she unburies them and takes the skeletons and does. And then she starts seeing the animal spirits herself. Recommended for ages 10 and up. Rating 5 stars. How about rating 7.5 stars? If this book doesn't get nominated for an Eisner this year, I would probably just say, here, have the damn Eisner. Best kids graphic novel. Now, here you go. That's how good this book is. We're going to go ahead and look at the first few pages of it. This is Snap riding her bike through to find her missing dog. Her missing dog, good boy. And they thought she'd heard that the witch had her dog, so she goes to the witch's house and sneaks in through all the thorny patches and stuff and gets there and finds her dog and gets the dog out. And as you can see, the dog is missing a leg. I don't know if you can read it, but she says, "What'd she do to you?" And Jax turns around and says, "Don't you know? I'm eating him piece by piece." And of course, she runs out of the house and trips over one of the thorns. She drops her doggy. And she basically confronts her. And then, basically this is how they met. And since she found out that Jax took care of her dog when the dog got hurt when it ran away, like they say, when she finds the opossums, she takes them to Jax to get them treated. So, and that's how the story continues on through that. And there's other stories. It's not just that. It's a coming of age story for Snap as well, and her interactions with her mother and with other characters, her fellow kids in the neighborhood, in town, and stuff. So it's quite a interesting story because there's a lot of depth of characterizations and relationships, not just between Jax and Snap, but like I said, with Snap and her mother, Snap and other characters as she goes through this relationship with Jax. And it's a coming of age story. It's about learning about mortality, and not just because of what Jax is doing with the animals and taking the roadkill and burying it and doing with the skeletons and stuff, but her own mortality as an elderly woman is also addressed in the story to an extent. So things like that is why this story gets to have that kind of power that I think it does have, and why I would put it up there as one of the best graphic novels for the year, and would say go ahead and give it the Eisner. I'm not saying there won't be anything else out there that compares to it, but this is something that should be like a Raina Telgemeier level book, and unfortunately probably going to get overlooked. I hope it doesn't. So hopefully, if you see this video, let people know about it. Our next book is called Tomorrow. Publisher's Dark Horse. Writers Peter Milligan. The artist is Jesus Hervas. Colorist is James Devlin. The genre is science fiction horror. Released just this week, February 26th. And what it is about. And basically, a Russian computer virus has jumped the species barrier and wiped out most of the adult population on the planet, leaving the world precariously in the hands of the next generation. In the wake of such devastation, musical prodigy Oscar Fuentes is separated from his twin sister, Sierra. Stranded on opposite sides of the country, they're swept into rapidly evolving networks of teenage gangs. Can Oscar find his way back to Sierra, or will they be lost to each other in a new civilization, mercilessly replacing the past? Ages 17 and up. This is part of the Burger Books line. 5-star rating. Great opening sequences for a first issue. The first page is Oscar discovering his mother's dead body, and then seeing his one of his music professors just start keeling over and dying. Next page over is some other kids whose mother succumbed to it and to the virus and had a car accident crash and is dead there at the wheel. And there's other scenes in this storyline where we can sit there and watch just dozens and dozens of cars just piled up with bodies, just blood pouring out of their mouths and noses and stuff. It's pretty creepy stuff. But it's kind of like this Peter Pan syndrome disease where only the youth, get to stay alive. And if that happens, what happens to the infrastructure of your planet? Because it takes adults to run certain things that are educated and experienced that younger people don't have. And what does that do to your infrastructure society-wise? And how quickly does it devolve? And that's what this whole book is about. And I find that quite interesting, to tell you the honest truth. How long is this? I don't know how long this series is going to be. I think it's a mini series, so it'll be really interesting to see where Milligan goes with this. Artistically, Jesus is doing some good art. I think I don't know. I like the cover art better than the interior, but I think the cover art is just, it's like the cover art has more, it's tighter line art, I guess you could say. Whereas the comic book pages are more fluid. Is what I would say. There's thicker line art, and there's a lot more fluidity, and a lot more shading, heavy shading in the story pages. But it needs to be that way, I guess, for the story of for darkness of the storyline. So, anyway, good strong lead for that issue, and hopefully it'll be good. The cover has more thought and composition. I don't know if it has more thought and composition. I think it has more traditional thought. It's a good movie poster type composition. Yeah, good use of empty space. That's true. Um, you know, but it's I think as far as composition goes, though, I mean, this is a good when you look at particularly on the left page where Oscar finds his mother. That is really a good composition in the sense of, especially the second panel, it's like, okay, he's standing back frozen. It's like the camera's pulling back like a horror shot, almost. So I can kind of see what he's doing with it. I don't know. I mean, I can see what you're saying about the third panel. That's kind of a blah comparative to others, but I don't know. I think the thing with I think, like you say, it's more the use of empty space, and it's just more. These two pages are really dark in the color compositions comparatively, I think, than the cover was, and the cover is kind of like bright to me, whereas the pages that in the earlier story was just darker. And the whole story is dark, but it's supposed to be dark because, I mean, it's pretty ominous stuff going on here. So, but yeah, it's a good start for the first issue of that book, and we'll see where it goes. And that covers our reviews for this week. And pretty much the show for this week. So if you want to reach me in the future, you can reach me at Lewis Bright Raven on Facebook, Lewis.BrightRaven, at deviantart.com/BrightRaven, here on YouTube at Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven, at Gmail at Quoth the Raven, LBR72 at gmail.com, Yahoo, Lewis Bright Raven at yahoo.com. The podcast is usually on Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you saying it's a great show. Hope you guys enjoy it. Also, again, back to the tomorrow cover. It's more of the empty space. The composition inside is good. I like the framing of the last panel with the parents in the car. Yeah, that too. Yeah, like I say, there's nothing wrong with Jesus's work. Really good stuff. Really, really good stuff. But yeah, the show was a little bit long today, but well, I usually do go along. Let's be honest, but we'll go one last notice for our COPPA regulations. As always, this episode is intended for 16 and up. While some of the content we will feature is kid-friendly, the context of our episode is to address adults and inform them of said content for them to research as consumers in service of their youth. There is possibility of language present on the episode. Well, there always is. I shouldn't just say the possibility. There will be adult language. Rated TV 16 and up. And so, I think, hold on a second, got something here. Okay, that was something else. Thought someone was texting me already. But thank you all for watching this week, and we will see you next week. There will be reviews for, I can't remember what books are. Midnight Sky number 4, I believe, and 2 or 3 other titles I just got this week that I haven't had a chance to read yet. And we'll also do some reviews for our previews. I just got previews this week. I haven't had a chance to go through previews, so we'll do preview reviews again. Some people really liked how I did that a few episodes ago, so we'll continue that tradition. And we'll see what else comes up between now and then. So until then, have a good show, good rest of the weekend, and see you next week. If the music would work, but it doesn't like to work. You will try it again.